Hello and welcome to the Vault. This is the venue that Metame, the company that my wife and I run in West Sussex, to present all our Enneagram workshops, our lab profile training and our Feldenkrais method classes. But today I would like to talk to you about an aspect of the Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram Institute authorised teacher, and there's something very unique about the insight approach developed by Don Riso and riso-hudson, and that is the levels of development. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So what are the Enneagram levels of development? Well, they're a way of measuring our degree to which we're either more identified with the aspects of our ego, our personality type, if you like, in Enneagram terms, the passions, or whether we're more able to be open to the possibility of the virtues, and in another way, they're a capacity. As we become more present, so we're becoming more present to aspects of ourselves that we don't want to see. And the levels of development are a way of being able to assess this, to see this. It also makes the difference when we look at the Enneagram levels of development in terms of the different types. You see, on the Enneagram, we will all be aware, if you've done any sort of studying and reading on the subject, of the 9 types. And there's various descriptions of the behaviours. Most of our own behaviours, our own experience, we will know that we are sometimes more aggravated, more reactionary, or less so. We're not just on and off. Life isn't so kind of digital, if you like. There's more of a linear and there's a movement. And it was these kind of differences that when Don Richard Riso was looking at the different types, trying to really put it together in his first book, Personality Types, that it didn't quite make sense for certain type descriptions to be able to just put it as a one kind of single descriptive paragraph, if you like. So what Don did was actually take some of the little traits and put them on many, many cards and sorted them into little piles until they started to become more coherent. The story of that is described in the Wisdom of the Enneagram book, so you can read a little bit more about that, and when you come on some of the workshops we talk a little bit about that, but that's not the main purpose, of course, of any workshop. You want to know what it does for you. So let's come back to the levels of development. What Don discovered was, instead of us having a model of the Enneagram which was just purely, if you like, flat, a bit like the face of a clock, that in fact there are these layers. There are 9 layers. He actually discovered it on the 7th of July 1977 and was a bit embarrassed by the fact that it seemed so neat. 9 types, 9 levels. Didn't quite sort of feel as if it should be so packed. But the Enneagram is quite mysterious and has these various ways in which 3 times 3 or the groups of 3 come together. So in the same way, what we also discovered was that the 9 levels fell into 3 distinct patterns, 3 distinct kind of layers, if you like. That I've coloured them here. So in the middle here, the green, we would call it the average level. This is probably where most of us are, and we oscillate from moment to moment. And then down here are the more unhealthy levels, the kind of behaviours associated with more mental health issues that we might talk about, depressions, deep depressions, and other psychotic aspects. And up here are the sort of behaviours and attitudes and ways of being that we would ideally like ourselves to be considered. Unfortunately, most of us are not really here. That's where we think we are, but generally we're running around this middle level here. If we look at it in terms of the map here, we can see that these 3 layers become more distinct just on this one: healthy levels, average levels, unhealthy levels. And that you can see there's a kind of a narrowing. We've used this to signify how there's more constriction as we go further down the levels and more openness as we go up. Now the thing is, there's no person moving here. It's a degree of consciousness. It's more of an openness as we move in our work. I just want to show you this. Some of you may remember the game of snakes and ladders. It's another way of thinking about it. We go through life, we start off and we're trudging along here. Something gives us a little lift. Someone says something nice to us and we feel a little bit better. and then we travel along, and oops, something comes along that upsets us. Maybe suddenly we find that the car isn't working, isn't sort of starting, somebody says something irritating us, and we're back to kind of where we were when we started out. We may even kind of start out in the morning and feel a little bit under the weather, and it reminds us of other things and other occasions when we feel under the weather, and we slip down into a bad mood pretty early on in life. And so it goes on, we go through life, and as you can see that I put a little string here, if you like, there's an oscillation through the course of the day, but it oscillates around the centre of gravity. And the centre of gravity is the key part of this. Each personality type will have, each person will have in their personality type their own centre of gravity. And as we do different amounts of work on ourselves, we may get to sort of feel a little bit higher, and the centre of gravity becomes a little bit, moves up. Therefore, it becomes easier to be lighter, and not quite so common that our pathway down the levels to more reactivity are going to happen. They're still going to be there, the old wounds are there, but it becomes less so. Equally, if we're having an awful lot of bad times in our life, a lot of stresses, or we actually came into the world under a very uncomfortable position, sadly the centre of gravity will move down, and so it becomes even easier to be more in these kind of lower depths of the structures of our personality ego. More wounds, if you like, more things can hurt us, we're more reactive. If we look at it in terms of the actual structures here, and this is something that you'll find when you look in the various Riso-Hudson books or come one of the courses. I'm not going to go through everything that's on this chart, but each level has its own distinct description. Where I started, this middle level, level 5, we call level of interpersonal conflict. And in Enneagram terms, this would be certainly where the passion shows up. It's starting to show up even at sort of level 4, but it's much more kind of in its raw form and sort of doing its own thing. And we're becoming more into the conflict. We call this the level of interpersonal conflict. We're trying to make people, convince people that we're right and they're wrong. And this gets worse as we go a little bit, move further down in the level. As we move up, so, well, maybe we can sense our sense of self and notice that maybe we're having reactions, but we have a certain amount of consciousness which you're able to, if you like, become more present, sort of stay with it, if you like, count to 10, and it doesn't take us down so much. So again, we take our little person, our centre of gravity. If we had a centre of gravity, say at level 4, level of fixation, there's an aspect here, there's a beginning of a sleep mode, if you like, but there's enough awareness here for us to be able to not maybe get pulled down so much, but for sure we will. If we can keep working on ourselves, going to various retreats and doing our meditation and staying open, we get to move more to the level of what we call the level of social gift. Looking at it from the other way, just before we kind of go there, really the whole thing starts at around here, level 2. It's where we start to see qualities that we would like to become. It's our idealized self. And the problem is that the idealized self is not something that the ego personality has to manufacture. It's kind of a natural part of our being, but we don't always see it. But also a natural part of our beings is to make mistakes, to make errors. When we live in a world where it's almost not acceptable to make a mistake, we have to be successful first time. But if you really look at the things you've learned, they've come through a lot of trial and error. So, in a way, what we find is developing in our consciousness as we move a little bit further up, we come back to this level 3. It's not that things are going right. Not necessarily even that we're behaving in a particularly better way, but we can see it. We're more open to the idea that, well, yeah, that's something I do also. And so we have less reaction around it. When someone else says something to us that seems to offend us, seems to upset us, instead of getting reactive and moving down here and getting insulted and reacting back, we can maybe stay with it. It's not so comfortable sometimes, but we get to digest it, we get to work through it and see that actually, is that really necessary for us and real for us to be reactive. Where does it really come from? This is the whole depth of the work. So the levels of development are a way of understanding where we are at any one moment. Are we more reactive? Are we moving down into the levels of overcompensation, where we're just feeling angry and wanting to hurt someone, even moving to level 7 where we do actually begin to violate and hurt someone? Or are we able to be a little bit more aware of the things that we'd like to be, but also see the things that are true that maybe are not meeting up to those standards that we've falsely really set ourselves? In truth, all human beings have qualities which are gifts, which are beautiful, and equally as human beings we make mistakes. That's part of being a human being. And the levels of development are measuring, if you like, a way in which are we more open, more able to be present to all the aspects of these difficulties that we sometimes find ourselves in without the reaction, or are we just in the reaction? Now there's various workshops you can come to learn more about the Enneagram Levels of Development. It's a big part of the Enneagram training, the first part 1, which is held generally in America. But the various workshops that you could come to, like the Journey of Growth, we look at what it feels like. What are the things we need to be able to see as we experience ourselves moving, our consciousness moving up the levels. But all the workshops, the Wisdom of the Enneagram, even the Instincts and the Relationships workshop, all see the levels of development as a key part. We can't change our type, but what we can do is change our level. We can work on ourselves and be more open, and that's going to make the bigger difference than type. Thank you for watching this. There'll be some other short videos and you can learn a little bit about some of the workshops in those, but maybe we'll see you again. The website, www.metame.co.uk, or have a look at the Enneagram Institute website. Thank you for watching.